Now, after 6 months in Parliament, the 2018 budget has been passed by the National Assembly with an increase to 9,120 billion naira, more than the 8.612 trillion naira earlier presented to it by President Muhammadu Buhari in November last year. The budget was passed at Wednesday's plenary. For more on these, I have with me in the studio public affairs analyst Adeniyi Kunnu. Thank you very much for finding time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the passage of the 2018 budget is coming 6 months after President Buhari presented it to a joint session of the National Assembly. In your opinion, what do you think is the implication of this delay? And also, why is it important for us to have a more predictable budget cycle, for instance, running from January to December?
Well, by way of reminder, let me say that the budget was also passed in May of last year. And many people decried the fact that it has to wait up until the moment it did for it to be passed. Well, we could say we're happy that an official document will soon become an effective piece of material to work with. But I think it's unsavory at this point in time to have the budget passed practically 6 months into the year that it should have been effective. And I feel that that's the area where those that have the responsibility to work on the material, on the appropriation bill, because if you look at it, at best it is still an appropriation bill because it has not been assented to by the president. We're happy that the senators or the lawmakers, both houses, have been able to at least agree to the tune of the 9.12 trillion that it is. But what is more effective is to have it leave their hallowed chambers, get to the office of the president, and in fact get it assented to.
On whose table really lies this responsibility? Sometimes last year the National Assembly was saying for us to pass this in January, it should be with us maybe 4 or 5 months earlier.
Well, that would be impossible. It's more or less like if you run a deficit budget, you're going to have delays because you've spent much more than you earn. And I think strongly that lots of the economic indices also do not appear favorable. The country's GDP stands at about 400 billion US dollars. Now, this budget, if I did a conversion to dollars at about 25 billion US dollars, that's 6 to 7% of the GDP of the country. We could say that it doesn't have much impact as other drivers of the economy that account for the remaining well over 97 or 93% of the private sector, the small and medium scale enterprises, which is positive. But I think strongly that because the budget is a policy document that accounts for investment that comes into the country, and also because what funds or enable funding of this budget is the oil sector. And I have to say that by virtue of all of the negatives from that particular sector, we still have all of the shaky experiences we have. So I think it's important to address core issues, look at what comes into the coffers of government. For instance, the NNPC, because of all the improprieties financially, such that it has become a cesspool of financial filth, is owing between 2010 and 2015, 8 trillion that KPMG just discovered it has not remitted. How on earth could you earn in dollars and you remit in naira?
We'll get to that details if we have the time. But
yes,
the
please.
2018 budget, as it is now,
yes, please,
has been increased by the National Assembly to the tune of 508 billion naira.
Yes, please.
Do you foresee some more delay if the executive seeks more clarification, as we've seen play out in the past?
Well, I think that if the politicians have the interests of the country at heart, they should go ahead and pass the budget, because if I looked at how the money has been shared itself, I discovered increments in the various, ministries, departments, and agencies. If you look at Power Works and Housing that got 682 billion, you want to talk about defense that got about 157 billion. Education also increased from less than 100 billion to well over about 102 billion. You want to also talk about health from 57 billion to about 86 billion. I think that, to be fair on the side of the lawmakers, this time they've been able to justify the increment by ensuring that it is spread across the various areas. But I am also worried that the National Assembly's budget moved from last year's 125 billion to 139. So that is where people begin to ask questions. That if many persons are complaining that the monies that go to you people appear to be too much, I think it is ideal to be altruistic enough to, to just cut it a little bit and make people not cry again.
So the recent rise in price of crude oil.
Yes, please.
I understand that it's now at $80 per barrel.
Most definitely.
Inspired the National Assembly to peg the 2018 budget oil benchmark to $51 per barrel instead of $45 per barrel
Yes.
as it was before. Would you say that this is rather ambitious, given the fact that the rise may not be sustained?
I think a particular area that many persons are not looking at is the differential between the price of crude oil that moves between 75.80, 79.80 in recent times, and the budget. It is ideal to have it pegged, at 51, up from $45 per barrel, which is good. But the concern that Nigerians should begin to actually have is the differential between 51 and 80. What happens to it? Because oftentimes these monies are not properly accounted for.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it is the amounts, the cumulative, that should go to the Sovereign Wealth Fund,
That's right.
which over time, gets depleted. So I think strongly that Nigerians must begin to, develop a consciousness of curiosity, especially when they talk about the budget being pegged at such an amount that it has been pegged at. So the differentials is what we should ask, where do you keep it? And apart from keeping it, it should be properly accounted for, even it will be used. So permit me come back to the budget. Let's not forget that we have a 492 million, 492, talking about the dollars now, for the 12 Tucano jet. And we also have another 78 billion, of course, for the Operation Lafia Dole to fight insecurity in the Northeast.
That's right.
These are not captured. For the money used for the 12 Tucano jets, they've requested that they will not add it to this budget.
They're asking
and
for
that the supplementary budget.
Right.
So these are all angles that must be properly considered to the Nigerians, who obviously are the owners of this national cake, not to be shared, but to be properly appropriated.
Let's stay with the oil price for a while.
Yes,
Some
please.
are saying that this is providence against smiling on Nigeria. I mean, $80 per barrel.
Yes.
Now, with this development, the Nigeria's excess crude oil account is expected to further swell above the current amount of $1.88 billion.
Yes, but that has depleted, even if we are happy for that. Yes, of course.
And also some are saying that the government is expected to hit a budget surplus with all of this development. Should Nigerians anticipate better days ahead?
Well,
amidst
okay.
perceptions that much is not done in a pre-election year.
Well, if you look at it, oftentimes it is typical of the country to go comatose in terms of economic activities once it's the election year. And let's not forget the first election comes up less than 2 months away. July 14, we'll go to Ekiti. Later in the year, we should go to Osun State.
That's right.
We have elections. 2019, we have full-fledged elections. So that simply means the economy of the country could lay comatose because that is the usual practice. But between now and 2019, when we have full-scale elections, I think it may be ideal, once this budget is up and running, to put certain things in place. Let's not forget that much of what will enable the economy get out of its prostrate state would have to be how much funds we put into capital expenditure. There's nothing the government can do with recurrent expenditures because the offices must run, salaries must get paid, allowances must be accounted for. But what will help Nigeria really move up, just as Bill Gates suggested when he came into the country a couple of months ago, is that the things that really affect the lives of the people must be addressed. Now let us look at education. At 102 billion naira, that is just a little over 1% of the country's budget. There is no country of the world that has developed, that has added value, home and abroad, without education. You want to talk about the health sector, at 86, that is even less than 1% of the budget of the country. That tells you that we really may not appear as a serious people. Angola is a country less than 50 or 60 million in population. The budget is 130 billion US dollars.
I'm afraid we're going to have to continue this conversation. There are issues of what is captured and what is not captured,
Yes, of
the
course.
increase in minimum wage and all of that. Public affairs analyst Adeniyi Kunnu, thank you very much for
Thank
finding
you for
time to
having
join
me.
us.
Thank you indeed.